Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Tonight, we are looking at the changing face of hospitality. Did you know that less than 2% of hotels in the U.S. are actually Black owned? Well, we will hear from a trailblazer who owns 11 hotels, including a new one that just opened in D.C. We'll also talk with a seasoned general manager and hospitality expert, and they will share their victories, barriers, and bold vision shaping the future of hospitality. My guests are Evans Charles, CEO of Frontier Development. Evans owns 11 hotels, including the recently opened Hyatt House in the District of Columbia. Thomas Penny, president of Donahoe Hospitality, and Dante Johnson, area general manager and author of Impact Hospitality. Thank you all so much for joining the conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Sure
happy
thing.
to be here.
Let me share a few fast facts about the hotel industry. The U.S. hospitality market is projected to reach nearly $247 billion this year. The U.S. hotel industry is a significant job provider, employing about 1.7 million people, demonstrating its role in the national workforce. And African Americans are underrepresented in hospitality leadership positions. They hold about 2.2% of director to CEO roles, while making up a larger portion of the overall workforce. That's about 15.2%. I want to start with you, Evans. You know, hospitality is often seen through the lens of service. Today, we are talking about ownership, opportunities for ownership, and high levels of employment, and the community. What does that mean to you? Whoops. Go ahead.
I think I know the question. Okay. To me, ownership means freedom. You know, building wealth is one element of it, but you know, the ability to be really impactful, where you can, provide opportunities for people from a working perspective, providing opportunities to contract with who you want to contract with, changing communities. It's just completely different level of just a space to be in when you have that kind of ability to make so much change from being in this driver's seat or so. It doesn't come without a lot of headache, I'll tell you that much. And it's not for the heart. But those who can stomach that and really want to make a difference, it's a beautiful thing.
Dante, you are nodding your head.
Yeah, I think everything that Evans just said resonates deeply with me. The industry can be transformative in the lives of the people who we have an opportunity to touch. And I think, when Evans talks about who we work with, job creation, wealth creation, everything that I've done from a leadership perspective in the industry has been to drive value into spaces where it's typically underrepresented and underestimated. And I think there's a way that we can do that creates superior outcomes for the business, but also that creates meaningful outcomes in the lives of people in these communities. And I think far too often we see healthy businesses operating in unhealthy communities, and I think this is a means of reconciling that. And when you talk about being intentional about all the decisions that we make every day, that's not just owners, operators, and managers. That's also in who we choose to patronize. And so my hope is that people listening to this conversation will be intentional about pouring into the work that we're doing.
Thomas?
Yeah, I would just add that I oftentimes say that the boardroom should look like the break room, and Black and brown folks have represented a large percentage of the workforce in our industry throughout this country's existence. It's time for us to get into the boardroom on the ownership and senior executive side. The three of us, we understand our responsibility. And as an example, roughly 20 plus years ago, when we were building the Walter E. Washington Convention Center, residents of Shaw did not want to concede 6 city blocks for others to come into the community and get the jobs. Mm-hmm. And so they said, what assurances are you going to give to make certain that folks from this community not only get the jobs, but have a chance to lead and own in the business? And so 20 something years ago, we started the Marriott Public Charter High School for the purpose of preparing young people at the time in Shaw for opportunities to ascend to the executive level positions in our business. And today we have 6 hospitality academies with programs at Ballou, Maya Angelou Public Charter School, Columbia Heights Educational Campus, Jackson Reed, and River Terrace Educational Campus, where we have high school students learning about the hotel business from operations to ownership. And we all spend time and make certain we give to that effort, because at the end of the day, it's not about what we have, it's about what we leave behind. And we're committed to making sure we leave the industry better than we found it. And that at the core of that is young people who come from where we come from.
Evans, I know that a lot of very young people grow up and want to be everything from, doctors and lawyers to sports figures and entertainers. I don't think I ever remember ever hearing someone saying, yes, well, I want to grow up and own a chain of hotels. So talk to me briefly about the evolution of you deciding that is what you wanted to do.
I echo the way you started the question. I mean, typically, you have to be able to see it before you can believe it, before you can achieve it. And I didn't see any business people and any hotel owners in my community. So it was not in my head. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was told to go to school and get a degree. Mm-hmm. And I got a degree and I got a second degree. And even after my master's degree, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So it wasn't until a light bulb went off in my head and I started learning about residual income from my landlord, and I went and educated myself and started with small residential investing in Philadelphia. But it wasn't until I got exposed to see people that looked like me owning hotels was when the light bulb went off. And that exposure came through first reading a book by Don Peebles, who's also from DC, that owned hotels. And I couldn't even imagine Black people owning hotels. So I wanted to learn more. And he was the chairman of a group called NABHOOD, National Alliance of Black Hotel Owners, Operators, and Developers. They were having a meeting in 2 weeks. I just jumped on a plane and I flew down to Atlanta. And then that was that moment. It was me actually seeing people that looked like me, but it really wasn't even me seeing the people that was on the stage, because these guys were a lot older than me. It was a 36-year-old guy named James. Can't think of his last name right now, but James he built the Hampton Inn, and he was 36 years old, and I was drawn to him because I felt like, wow, I was in my early 30s or so, and he was somebody that I can relate to. And he's somebody I can learn from and pick his brain. But that's where that inspiration came from. And then from there, I built my entire team, and then I've been just going from there. I mean, it's a long story. I don't want to take up this whole interview.
No, go ahead. Yeah, Dante, when Evans was talking about headaches and you were nodding your head vigorously, tell me not only what some of those headaches are, and as a general manager, what's the aspirin that you found for those headaches?
I was nodding because, honestly, Harold, believe it or not, I'm not easy to work with.
No,
I have opinions about lots of things, and so and my belief is that that's where great outcomes come from, and I think we're meant to express ideas, to mix it up, and I think through some of that friction is where smooth edges get roughed out, and or rough edges get smoothed out, and we're able to actually achieve greatness. And so to me, the headaches are part of the process. And I think, you don't achieve anything iconic if you're not willing to get in and do the work. And all of it in my mind, I think about all the people who are inspired by what we're doing. And when Thomas and Evans are talking about origin stories, there's so much connectivity there. Thomas was the GM of a hotel that was owned by Don Peoples. I interned in his office when I was in middle school. I went to the precursor to Maya Angelou public charter school, W. Bruce Evans. I was one of the teenagers in Shaw during the time that Thomas was talking about. So when you look at the seeds that were planted, 2 or 3 decades ago, and how they blossom into meaningful things now, I think we're all living examples of that.
So give me an example of a headache.
Well, I don't see them as headaches. I see that as the process and as the work. But I think, if you're running a hotel or any business, it's like running a small city that has, at any given time, a couple hundred citizens who all have needs. And I think balancing the needs of those citizens, balancing what's going to resonate with a particular audience, to me can be complicated work, but it's rewarding in that you put a lot of smiles on a lot of people's faces. And I think what we're building here is so unique. It's so unique. And it's not just because of the people who are on the other side of it. I think the hotel sits at an intersectional destination between the convention center, which, Thomas gave some of the history of just that structure, and even the way the convention center is built, where there's access on both sides, to move freely through that space, to, people who've moved into the community in the last 10 or 15 years, to people who've been here for decades. I think there's a lot that's meaningful about what we're doing. And honestly, man, I don't see any of it as a headache. I see that as work that we get the privilege to do.
Thomas, explain to me, because in introducing everyone, I was pretty clear about what everyone else did, but Donahoe Hospitality, I mean, that sounds really broad. Kind of share with me the thumbnail sketch of what that is.
So Donahoe owns hotels, and it's part family owned and part senior leadership owned, of which I'm a part of the senior leadership structure that is a part of the ownership structure of Donahoe. But we own and operate hotels, some of which we operate for other owners. So we're a third party operator for other owners, and we operate our own hotels. In the case of the Hyatt House, we are a third party operator working in support of Evans. And what we were incredibly excited about around this opportunity, to Dante's point, this hotel is a few blocks from Cotter G. Woodson's house, a few blocks from Howard University, a few blocks from the site of the James Wormley Hotel, which is an African-American who owned a hotel in 1869, a few years after the Civil War, one of the most prestigious hotels in the city. And he also, in 1871, lobbied Congress to get the first funds set aside for the first elementary school for African Americans in the Sumner School. And so this location is an important location, not only as it relates to the city, but also as it relates to our history. And as soon as Evans and I started talking about it, there was no other leader better positioned and better prepared to lead it than Dante Johnson. And so Evans took a second mortgage on the hotel to bring him up from Atlanta.
So let me just say that all jokes aside, in this present economy, Dante, it's good to know that you're being paid. And that you do not have to worry about the price of eggs. And I'm sure that those of my listeners who are hearing this, I can hear a chorus of people saying real talk. Right.
Can I just chime in on something you said real fast, Harold?
Real quick, go ahead.
Yeah. So no, and if you look at us here, I mean, it's such a privilege to have, and I think it's unprecedented that you have a hotel in a major gateway city like this with a major brand that every element of it is being touched, from operations to capital to ownership, by people that look like who you see here on the screen. So I'm extremely excited to have that be, what we have put together here and what we're trying to expand upon and grow. And Thomas and I have known each other for a long period of time, and we've always been trying to figure out a way and saying to ourselves, why aren't we doing deals together? So for this to be the first and hopefully of many, and introducing me to people like Dante, who he's known for over a decade or so, who's a consummate professional, just this ecosystem that we're building is just extremely exciting.
Hold that point, because I have so many more questions to ask you about the hotel business. How do you compete and the like? So please stay with us. We are going to take a quick break. Don't forget, you can hear this in every edition of the Daily Drum Inside segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. This conversation continues on Sirius XM, channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM, channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about Black ownership in the hospitality industry. My guests are Dante Johnson, Area General Manager and author of Impact Hospitality; Thomas Penny, President of Donahoe Hospitality; and Evans Charles, CEO of Frontier Development. He is also the owner of 11 hotels, including the new addition, the Hyatt Place in D.C. Evans, I do want to talk to you, and anyone can chime in, but I'll start with you. In the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about the really low percentage of Black ownership, and I just want to talk about hotels, not bed and breakfasts and the like, but hotels. Obviously, everyone is familiar with Sheila Johnson and Salamander. When you talk about what she has done, for example, just in Middleburg, Virginia, and the excellence there, the Brown family in Baltimore with the Ivy Hotel, and the like. Obviously, these are luxury properties. Okay, there is no question about that. But Evan, how do you? This is, my goodness, this is DC. An observer would say, "Oh, so we need yet another hotel in DC? Aren't there enough?" How do you compete? How do you be successful when the competition is so thick?
Well, DC is also known as a high barrier of entry market. It's very capital intensive. So it's not like being on some highway, off of some highway, some suburban site where it's easy to buy land and it's just to build it. It's extremely expensive to come into this market. So that's one thing that sort of constrains supply, meaning like competition. So even if you think about what we just acquired, it was already existing hotel rooms that was already in the market. We just took a brand, a Cambria brand, and we converted it to a higher end brand of Hyatt House to tap into the Hyatt reservation system and continue to compete or so. So location. Hotels is real estate. At the end of the day, it has a 24-hour operating business within it. We're 2 blocks from the convention center. We're in Shaw, but we're technically downtown, as downtown has evolved with all of the cool amenities or so. We have a strong brand. We're the second Hyatt House in DC. Matter of fact, an entire inside the Beltway, in an entire region or so. So I think we have a competitive advantage there. We're going to be providing some unique amenities. We have an adjacent rooftop that we're going to be delivering that we think is just going to be superb and unique. When that delivers. So, and then we have Donahoe Hospitality in Dante. If you look at Donahoe's portfolio, we are an extended stay property. And when I've evaluated kind of what they've done in the space, no one knows DC the way they do. They're DC. They know DC inside and out. They know this segmentation inside and out. Dante is a product of this neighborhood. He went to Banneker or so, and he's coming back home, and he has a level of passion to win and succeed. We think we have a winning team here, and we're prepared to compete.
Mm-hmm. Dante, what do you think is the biggest obstacle to success for starting any hotel, whether it's in DC or any other part of the country? Again, I've stayed in a lot of hotels, and everybody offers, something different. And I'll even try to answer my own question as a consumer, and you can tell me if this is one of the things. I think amenities are great, but the thing that's really important to me is that when I walk into a hotel, it looks clean, it feels clean, that the light bulbs are not burned out, that I don't have to fight with the television, that the Wi-Fi works like you told me it worked at the front desk, and those are the basics. How am I doing there, Dante?
No, I think you've covered the ground beautifully. And to your point, that's the price of admission. Like if you're not covering that ground, then you're not even in the game. And so things have to work, things have to be clean. And to your point, I mean, nowadays Wi-Fi is it's a utility. It's not a luxury. I think the thing that sets any property in any corner of hospitality apart is always going to be the people. And I think it's the most cherished asset that you can bring to the table. It also, in this moment, is probably more uniquely challenging than it's ever been, just given all the shifts that we've seen in culture, all the shifts that we've seen in the workforce, post-pandemic George Floyd. The industry looks a little different, and so I think there's an opportunity for us to welcome people into the space, more actively and more seamlessly than we ever have. And so I think for people like us who are rooted in this community, the cultural fluency that comes along with that, to Evan's point, I think makes us uniquely positioned to win.
Thomas, on that point, whether you go all the way back to the green books or the travel books of our grandparents or great grandparents, when during the days of segregation, where Black people made or broke your business. But this is 2025, and you do have to have more broad appeal, even under the current political climate and DEI, and we can go on about that. But how do you, Thomas, have a broader appeal for the masses?
So I want to say Charles Drew has it's a quote by Charles Drew in the medical school at Howard University, where he says, "Excellence of performance will transcend artificial barriers created by man." Right? For us, it's all about excellence, and it's all about Dante being able to inspire a culture of excellence for the team. As Evan said, we're trying to create something special here, and we want team members that believe in what we're trying to create, have a sense of pride in what we're trying to create, and are committed to doing it better than anybody else in the city. There's roughly 150 hotels in the city. The goal for this team is to have this hotel to be the highest, the best hotel team in the city. And that's why we went to Atlanta to bring Dante home, because not only does Dante have experience running high-performing hotels, he also has experience creating high-performing teams. And right now he has a young front office manager at his hotel, a young guy who's probably sub 30, who's looking to have a bright future in this business. Dante being able to share both his successes and the mistakes he may have made as he was coming up in the business is going to be critically important to that front office manager having the confidence to deliver an unparalleled guest experience. And if he can do that and have his team to do that in a unique way, we're going to be able to have an experience that will allow for us to be successful not only today but far into the future.
Let me ask you this, Evans. Do you believe that in order to have a successful hotel that you need to have kind of a Disney World mentality where as soon as you step on the property, the experience is transformative?
Did you say what kind of world?
Disney World.
Oh,
Yeah.
Disney.
Yeah.
Disney.
Have you ever been to Disney World? Maybe I should have asked that first. Because look, this is not a plug. Let me just recommend brother to brother for someone who does appreciate good hospitality. If you have not been to Disney World, let me just tell you, there is no drink that could give you.
No. In all seriousness, now I hear you. I hear the question. I understand it clearly. We're in the hospitality business, and it's all about your experience. From the time you get out of, you touch down into DC, you get out of your Uber, you get to our doors or so. What do you experience as soon as you walk through those doors? And I mean, it's our job, to create an incredible experience, from the rather it's the valet person to when you get to the front desk, to the housekeeper, to everybody you see and touch, you just have a pleasant experience because you're greeted with a smile, and you're greeted with people who are here to just service you and be of service. And if we can just add a little bit of serenity to your day, a little bit of relaxation, anything that we can add to just relieve you from all of the stresses that you're dealing with when you're out in the work world, if you're here visiting or whatever it may be. And it's our job. And that's why we really rely on, guest experiences and what they post online in the form of reviews and things of that nature. We go out of our way to just create experiences because that's the business we're in. In order to create residual business, we need you to have a great experience to go and let everyone else know you've had a great experience to attract more people to come. So that's the business we're in, and that's paramount to our success.
And Harold, if I could just add, especially given everything that's happening in the city, when they get to the Hyatt House, we want them to basically be able to forget everything that's happening and to really just fully embrace their experience. And I think we have a greater responsibility in this moment to really show what this city is capable of. We're all proud having been born here, having been reared here. And our charge is to make sure guests are able to fully appreciate what it is our city has to offer. And again, we feel a greater sense of responsibility in this moment.
Do you have any concerns, as you said, considering what's going on in this city, about the Trump administration and its ICE component snatching members of the Latino community off the street? As we know, it doesn't matter whether you're in DC or any other part of this country. If you've gone to a hotel, you know that many of the housekeeping staff are members of the Latino community. And they have been greatly impacted by the administration's actions. What impact has that had, or do you believe it will have on hospitality moving forward?
So, Harold, when I got to Donahoe 30 years ago, there were Latino and Ethiopian room attendants and servers who taught me the business when I was 21 years old. They're members of our family. Mm-hmm. And if they're experiencing hardship, either directly or indirectly by way of their families, clearly we're very much concerned about that. I think we've done everything we can to make sure that we advise them how to kind of navigate the city in this moment. But we've also doubled down on our support our love for them and our care for them. And again, you know, in hotels, we spend more time with our people than we spend with our families. And they're very much a part of our families. And when they experience hardship, we do too.
Mm-hmm. Evans or Dante, your thoughts about that as well?
I think Thomas nailed it for me. And you know, you're talking about communities that have been the backbone of the industry for decades, and this moment's no different. And you know, when you talk about all the opportunities that we have to show up for people, you know, this is a prime example of that. And you know, Thomas has alluded a couple times to me moving back home from Atlanta. This was a question that people asked me before I made the move, and I think, you know, in this moment, you know, in this space, there's nowhere else that I belong, except for being able to stand with folks who deeply need it.
Yeah. I do want to talk more about the business because I'm sure that there are some listeners who are saying, maybe this is something that I want to consider, or maybe this is something that I want to consider for my children. I have a cousin who he's a caterer, for example, who was inspired by my aunt's fledgling catering business before she lost her battle with cancer. And as an independent single operator, he has done exceptionally well. But Evan, you said in the beginning, if you don't see it, you can't be it. So what advice would you give to someone who is listening and saying,
I thought there was more to it as far as trying to get into ownership or so.
Mm-hmm. I mean, where do they start? Do they start in high school? Do they go and get a business degree? Do they go and get a degree in hospitality? Perhaps public relations?
Understood. So, if you want to start with just my recommendation from a formal educational route or so, at least from me, from where I sit, this is first a real estate play. I mean, that's what this is. This is real estate first.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little different from operations. I mean, we're looking at it, you know, yes, we have a 24-hour operating business within our real estate, but it's real estate. So people, and one thing I did not understand from an ownership perspective was how these deals were capitalized. When I was doing smaller deals, I bought something that cost $200,000. I had to bring 30% of that to the table, $60,000, and I financed 140, and then that was the math, and I took care of all the equity. Now, when you're talking about things that are in the tens of millions of dollars, I thought that I needed all my own capital. I didn't understand how the capital stack worked. I have no formal education on finance, on economics. I don't have an MBA. So if I had to do it all over again, just understanding finance, I think, that's the biggest barrier in our industry or so is capitalization and how do you get access to capital. And I tell people it's well, I'm not going to say that. All right, I'll keep that to myself. But but I put more capital in much smaller deals than I have in larger deals personally or so, because I understand how to capitalize them. I'll just keep it as simple as that or so. Educating yourself is going to be paramount, but this also takes something that you can't teach. It's a level of confidence and a level of willingness to take some form of risk and to bet on yourself, right? Because this is entrepreneurship, and there's just a different risk factor when you're sitting where I'm sitting, but there's also opportunities for it to be like phenomenal as well too. But it just comes with a lot when you go through it. Find a mentor. And I think a conference like NABHUR, like the one that I mentioned, one that is the only one that I'm aware of that is of people of color, or there's other conferences. There's a wealth of knowledge, and really, it's all about your network. And most of what I've achieved today is based off relationships. It's in who you know and who's in your network or so. So I think starting to develop that network can really catapult your growth into getting into ownership on top of knowledge, and eventually that will come with learning how to get it capitalized.
Thomas, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just want to add, we're fortunate at the height of the pandemic, post George Floyd, the industry came together to honor Arne Sorensen, the former president CEO of Marriott, who passed away at the height of the pandemic. Honor him and honor Marriott's soon to be 100th year anniversary of having started in DC by forming the Marriott Sorensen Center at Howard University. And the whole purpose of this program being formed was to disrupt the industry. It was recognizing that there is not enough African Americans on the ownership and the senior leadership side. And so the program was created to basically be a center that would receive students from all other schools into an accelerated program to prepare them for ownership and senior leadership roles, where they were going to be connected with C-suite leaders to help them understand finance, sales and marketing, operations, accounting at a high level to really just accelerate their progress. And now we have a dynamic group of young people who I would put against any students anywhere in the country that have had a great deal of exposure, that are ready to set the world on fire. So I would say to any parent considering, who wants to see their kids consider hotel ownership, I would look no further than the Marriott Sorensen Center at Howard University.
What do you believe, Thomas, has been the biggest barrier to hotel ownership post civil rights era?
I mean, it's access to capital without question. But it's also, you can't see, you can't be who you can't see. And it's incredibly important. I would say, I spend a great deal of time, obviously, trying to run the best hotels. But it's also important that we spend a lot of time in the community, because too much is given, much is required. And we have to inspire the next generation with the confidence to believe that they can own hotels. And we have to create opportunities for them to get on the ownership superhighway. And so we spend a lot of time between Howard's Marriott Sorensen Center and these hospitality academies, letting young people know that this is something they can do. And it is our collective legacy to make certain that we do everything we can to basically create pathways for them to do it.
Dante, from a managerial standpoint, how do you whip your green staff into shape? And I ask this because, again, this goes back to businesses that have been successful with customer service, whether it be a Walt Disney, a Chick-fil-A, a Salamander, any of the places. One of my first jobs was at McDonald's. Now, McDonald's isn't what it used to be when it comes to, hospitality or the like. The world, certainly the world has changed. But now, when dealing with modern young people, and you said you're not the easiest person to get along with. How do you separate? And I think that's important. How do you separate the wheat from the chaff, to use a biblical phrase?
Yeah. There's a couple of things that I'll highlight. I think all the iconic brands that you mentioned, there's a through line and a direct correlation between excellence and training. And I think what all of those brands and logos have in common is robust training models. I think I don't characterize anything that I do as whipping people into shape. I am sowing seeds and cultivating. And I think one of the things I cannot emphasize strongly enough how meaningful it's been throughout my career that I met Thomas when I was in high school, and he's never not picked up the phone.
Mm.
We never worked together before 3 months ago, and he's never not picked up the phone. But I'm not special or unique in that respect. I meet people all the time who go, "Oh, you know, Mr. Penny." So when we talk about people who should be the next generation of leaders in the industry, I think we share in the responsibility to cultivate that and facilitate that. And I think certainly they would get there without us one way or the other, but I think we're uniquely positioned to be able to hold the door open. And so we talk about pouring into department heads who are early in their careers, who are trying to find their way. I think that's what we're meant to do, not just with the people in the building, but with the people in the community as well. And I had an opportunity to speak to that inaugural class for the Marriott Sorensen program. And I've spoken in front of tons of groups of people. I've never been more impressed by a room. I've never been more impressed by a room. So the talent is there. What they do with it will be directly connected to what we do with the opportunities that we have in the positions where we sit.
I have about a minute left. Evans, I'll let you have a final word. What do you think is the next evolutionary step in Black ownership for hospitality?
Well, I can go on a soapbox as it relates to the wealth gap and what we need to do collectively as a people, to close the wealth gap or so. But what do we need to do to cultivate the next? I think what we started talking about here, I think it's our responsibility to not only be examples, like what I mentioned about Don Peoples. He was an example. I'm not trying to minimize him, but he was an example, and that example inspired me, right? So we all represent that. But outside of that, there's so much knowledge that I think that I know we have, but going back into the communities and going to different, working with different organizations, which is what I do, and providing information as well as inspiration from a standpoint of how to get to where we are. And then, if we can provide internships and mentorships and really kind of allow people to get in and see how this all works or so to really cultivate the next generation. There's just a few of us here. Like you mentioned, there's 2%.
Mm-hmm.
And what is it? I guess we got to take it one step at a time. How do we get to 3, 4, 5, and 6 or so? And I think that one thing we need to do first and foremost is within this 2% is we need to support each other, as just fellow people of color or so. And there's so few of us, and we can never look at each other like competition because we're not competing against each other. We don't own enough collectively as a group to compete with one another. So, there's a lot of things that we need to do, and I can go on and on or so, but those are just a few things just off the top of my head that I think that we should start to do is support each other and then try to lift the next generation collectively.
I think that'll have to be the last word. Evans Charles, Thomas Penny, Dante Johnson, thank you all so much. Congratulations and much success to you all. I appreciate your time. That is the Daily Drum for this Tuesday, September 9th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.